Meet two people, Renee and Tyler, both 28. Both work in retail management, both earning exactly $52,000 a year. Same city, same cost of living. 8 years ago, they were in nearly identical financial positions. No savings, living paycheck to paycheck, watching each deposit disappear within days of hitting their account. Today, Renee hasn't been paycheck to paycheck in 7 years. Tyler still is. Same income this entire time. Neither one got a windfall, an inheritance, or a sudden raise that explains the gap. And here's the part that surprises people. It wasn't about willpower, and it wasn't about budgeting harder either. Renee didn't out-discipline Tyler. She broke a specific structural mechanic that most people don't even realize is running underneath their financial life. And once you understand what that mechanic actually is, you'll understand exactly why some people escape this cycle, and others stay stuck in it for a decade or more, regardless of income. I'm Ellie, and I make videos about the numbers behind the decisions everyone assumes are obvious, but usually aren't. If you've ever felt like paycheck to paycheck is just something that happens to certain people, or that it's a personal failing you haven't fixed yet, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the actual mechanism, and it's not what you think. Hit subscribe if that sounds useful. Let's get into it. Here's the thesis of this entire video. Living paycheck to paycheck isn't primarily an income problem or a discipline problem. It's a timing problem. Specifically, it's what happens when your spending is synchronized to the exact moment your income arrives, with zero float between the two. Understanding that distinction is the entire difference between staying stuck and getting out. Let's define the mechanic precisely, because this is where most explanations get vague. When you're paycheck to paycheck, money arrives, and within days, sometimes hours, it's already spoken for. Rent, groceries, gas, minimum payments, all of it draws down the same deposit that just landed. There's no gap between income and expense. They're synchronized. The paycheck isn't a resource you're managing. It's a pass-through. Money moves through you, not to you. Tyler's paycheck lands on the 15th and the 30th. Rent is due on the 1st, which means it comes out of the 15th's deposit, 12 days early, relative to when most people think of it as this month's rent. Every single month, Tyler's essentially paying for the upcoming month using money that technically belongs to the tail end of the current one. It works technically, but it works with zero margin. One slightly early bill, one slightly delayed paycheck, one $400 car repair, and the entire system breaks because there was never any float built into it to absorb a shock. Renee's system, roughly a year before her escape, looked identical to this. Same paycheck schedule, same bills, same zero float. Here's exactly what she did differently, and it took her about 10 months to build the actual buffer, followed by a slower stretch of adjusting her habits around it, which is worth being honest about, because this isn't an overnight fix. She started by finding $40 a month she genuinely didn't need, canceling one subscription and switching to a cheaper phone plan. $40 a month for 10 months is $400, which isn't a big number on its own. But she didn't spend that $400. She let it sit, completely separate from her regular spending, in an account she didn't touch. By month 10, she had accumulated enough to cover about half of 1 month's core living expenses. Around month 11, her tax refund came in, $700, which in previous years had always gone towards something immediate, a slightly better vacation, a small debt payoff, whatever felt most urgent at the time. This time, she added it directly to the same untouched account. That single addition was the tipping point. Combined with her 10 months of small contributions, she now had just about $1,100 sitting in an account completely separate from her regular check. Here's the part that actually matters, and it's the part almost nobody explains clearly. $1,100 isn't a huge emergency fund. It's roughly what Renee needed to cover her core expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, for about 3 weeks. And 3 weeks turned out to be exactly the gap she needed to break the synchronization. The next month, instead of paying her bills using the paycheck that had just landed, she paid them using the $1,100 sitting in her buffer account. Then, when her actual paycheck arrived days later, instead of spending it immediately, she used it to refill the buffer back to its starting point. She had, in effect, inserted a 3-week delay between when money arrived and when it got spent. The paycheck that used to be a pass-through instrument became, for the first time, a genuine deposit she was managing on a slight delay, rather than a live wire she was reacting to in real time. This sounds like a small technical shift. It is a small technical shift, but it changes everything about how the rest of your financial life operates, and here's specifically why. Once Renee had that 3-week buffer in place, an unexpected expense stopped being catastrophic in a very particular way. Not because she suddenly had more money overall. Her total resources hadn't changed dramatically, but because the buffer absorbed the shock instead of her next paycheck having to. When her car needed a $200 repair 4 months after she built the float, she paid it from the buffer and then spent the next month rebuilding that gap slightly more slowly than usual. Annoying, but not catastrophic. Tyler, facing the same $200 repair with no float, had to put it on a credit card because his next paycheck was already fully allocated to bills that were due before that paycheck even arrived. This is the actual mechanism that separates people who escape paycheck to paycheck from people who don't. It's not that Renee earned more. She didn't, for years. It's not that she was more disciplined in some abstract personality sense. It's that she built a specific structural buffer, roughly equivalent to 2 to 4 weeks of core expenses, that broke the synchronization between income arriving and income being spent. Once that synchronization breaks, the entire system stops running in a permanent crisis mode because shocks get absorbed by a buffer instead of by whatever bill happens to be due next. Here's why Just Budget Better and Just Earn More both fail to fix this specifically, and it's worth being precise about why. Budgeting harder, tracking every dollar more closely, cutting more expenses can absolutely help someone spend less. But if there's still zero float between income and expense, a tighter budget just means you're synchronized at a lower dollar amount. The synchronization itself, the actual mechanic causing the paycheck-to-paycheck feeling, remains completely intact. You can be extremely disciplined and still be one car repair away from disaster because discipline was never the missing ingredient. Structure was. Earning more runs into a similar problem. And this is the part that surprises people most. When income increases without a deliberate decision to build float first, spending usually rises to match the new income almost immediately because the synchronization mechanism doesn't care how much money is flowing through it. It just synchronizes to whatever the new number is. Someone earning $52,000 with zero float and someone earning $80,000 with zero float are experiencing the exact same structural problem. They're just experiencing it at different price points. This is precisely why people who get raises often report feeling just as financially stressed a year later. The number changed, the mechanism didn't. So what actually breaks the cycle, concretely? It's building what's sometimes called a one-paycheck buffer, though the honest math usually lands closer to 2 to 4 weeks of core expenses rather than a full month, depending on your specific bill timing. The goal isn't a large emergency fund in the traditional sense. It's specifically enough float to let you pay this month's bills using money that arrived last month, rather than money that's arriving right now. Here's a realistic path to building it, because the honest version of this process takes time, and pretending otherwise would set people up to feel like failures for not doing it in a month. Start by identifying the smallest amount you can consistently set aside without it creating its own crisis, even $20 or $30 per paycheck. Direct every windfall specifically toward this buffer instead of your regular spending. A tax refund, a work bonus, birthday money, anything outside your normal paycheck rhythm. Keep this money in an account that's genuinely separate from your everyday spending account. Ideally one that requires an extra step to access, so it doesn't quietly get absorbed back into regular spending before it reaches a useful size. Once you have roughly 2 weeks of core expenses saved, you're close enough to attempt the actual shift. Pay one full billing cycle using the buffer instead of your incoming paycheck. Then use that paycheck to rebuild the buffer rather than spending it immediately. This is the moment the synchronization actually breaks. It will feel uncomfortable the first time because you're deliberately not spending money that just landed in your account. Money that every instinct built over years of paycheck to paycheck living will be screaming at you to use immediately. Let's go back to Renee and Tyler one more time, because I want the contrast to be completely clear. Renee didn't earn more than Tyler for the first 6 of these 7 years. She didn't inherit money. She found $40 a month, redirected one tax refund, and spent about 10 months building a buffer worth roughly 3 weeks of expenses. That specific structural change is the entire reason she hasn't been paycheck to paycheck in 7 years, while Tyler, on the identical income, still is. This isn't a story about Tyler failing at something Renee succeeded at through sheer willpower. Tyler has tried budgeting apps, spreadsheets, extreme frugality months, all the conventional advice. None of it addressed the actual mechanism, because the synchronization between income and expense was never the target of any of those efforts. He was optimizing the amount flowing through the pass-through instrument. He never actually converted the pass-through into an account he was managing on a delay. If you're currently paycheck to paycheck, here's what I want you to take from this. The problem probably isn't your income, and it probably isn't your discipline, even though it feels that way at 3 in the morning doing math about which bill can wait. The problem is almost certainly that your spending and your income arrival are perfectly synchronized, with no float between them to absorb a single shock. Building even a small buffer, 2 to 4 weeks of core expenses, and then deliberately shifting to spending last month's money instead of this month's is the specific mechanical change that breaks the cycle. It's slower than anyone wants it to be. It took Renee about 10 months to build it, and longer still to fully trust it. But it's a structural fix for a structural problem, which is exactly why budgeting harder or earning more on their own so often fail to solve something they were never actually designed to touch. If this helped you see the paycheck to paycheck cycle differently, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos that run the numbers nobody else bothers to run.